I'm really pleased to be here with one of the most optimistic people that I know, Holly Ransom. So thanks for having a chat today and helping give us some inspiration for the week. And I thought I'd start by asking you how you stay optimistic. What are the things that really drive optimism for you?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me, Kelly. It's great to be here and chatting with you. And for me, it's a choice, right? We can choose to be negative or we can choose to be optimistic. And sometimes that takes more choosing than other days, right? Particularly over the last 12, 18 months with the challenges we've faced, it's very easy to focus on the negatives. I think the other thing is choosing to work with and surround myself with people who I see as points of light. I've spent the last year writing a book that is focused on sharing the stories of these points of light so more of us have sources of optimism. But there are so many people out there who are doing inspiring things, who are being the change that they want to see in the world, who are leading with courage and with vision and with integrity. And so I think the more that I can choose to focus on them and their example and the less I choose to give airspace and time to the negative, the easier it is to be pragmatically optimistic. I think it's important we don't be, optimistic to the point where we can't acknowledge fault and be constructive, but I choose to be optimistic.
And I agree. It's a lot about the choices that you make. I guess the way that we lead it is not just by sort of blindly going after optimism, but by powering it using options. And so what we do in any situation is say, okay, well, what are our options here? And the fact even that you can articulate more than one option means that you're making a conscious choice and you can choose the optimistic option, the one that creates hope and benefit for the most people. So I think we've tied it together quite nicely in a way. And I'm sure there are times where you've been tested and had to really sort of dig deep. Do you have any tips from times like that? Like, how did you get yourself out of a negative spiral?
One is what I call circuit breakers. So just knowing for you things that can help you recharge, a bit like plugging your phone in and getting the battery back up. For me, that's exercise. For me, that's being in conversation with people that are energetic. I'm someone that is a kinesthetic learner and communicator. So talking out loud and being with people, I'm an extrovert, that gives me energy. But for other people, it's drawing, it's reading, it's taking time to meditate, it's going to yoga. One of the biggest, most profound changes I've made in my life is starting to manage energy instead of managing time. And that change has helped me, I think, prevent a lot of those downtimes, because I think that if we're conscious of how we manage our energy, we can help stave off some of those times where we're starting to dip or heads towards a low by being really intentional about doing things that re-energize us. I think the other thing is just that consciousness of who I'm surrounding myself with and who I'm using as sounding boards or supporters. Don't struggle in silence is something I'm really passionate about. There are hard times, and reaching out to people, letting them know that you're having a difficult moment, asking for their support, seeking their advice, just seeking to have an opportunity to connect and go completely escape and go enjoy some time and a walk in nature together. I think those two things have been really powerful and pivotal for me in challenging moments. How about you?
So yeah, I was going to say it's very similar for me. We have a cultural attribute at Optus about being strengthened by others. And if I think back to times when I've been feeling really negative or not knowing how to get out of something, actually spending time with my team and giving everybody the chance to contribute and owning the problem together rather than taking it all on yourself has really lightened the burden and helped me see that there are lots of different perspectives and ways to approach things. I want to talk a little bit about disruption. It'd be great to get your thoughts on this idea of a leading edge and how companies develop a leading edge.
And so for me, there's a couple of things that are really important there. How are you creating the culture inside your team and organization to ensure good ideas can come from anywhere? Frontline staff, customers, executives, right the way through the business, that openness to ideas and idea generation. Every entrepreneur I interviewed when it comes to the leading edge, and entrepreneurial businesses as well with entrepreneurs internally in big corporates, it's about the velocity of ideas. So it's not about this one great, brilliant idea. It's about the 100 ideas that we've surfaced, quickly tested, and we've worked out these have merit and now we're experimenting with them. So I think there's something around how do you make sure you've got that culture around the velocity of ideas. The other thing there's this really big emerging school of thought on when it comes to disruption is how do you get more divergent thinking on a problem? So Harvard, Stanford, and a range of others have been looking at research that says increasingly we're seeing problem solved by people who are more removed from expertise on the problem themselves. So people that aren't necessarily 30 years deep in that particular technical skill, but actually fresh eyes looking in or coming with an entirely different skill set or perspective and going, oh, have you thought about doing it like this? And so I think we're seeing this emergence. We're seeing it in companies like Lego. We're seeing it at NASA. We're seeing it, across the board for crowdsourcing ideas and thinking about how we open source solutions to problems or generate more diversity around the decision-making table. And that being a really powerful fuel for disruption. What about yourself?
It's really interesting. You spoke about the velocity of ideas. It's something that, the way I refer to it is I'm trying to get the metabolic rate of the company up so that we're able to surface ideas, experiment, really get things happening at a different pace. And it's one of the things I'm proudest about what we're doing at Optus. We are getting a lot of ideas from a lot of people. We are doing things no one in the industry has done before. Our living network is a completely new way to think about telco services. And so it's really great to see that happening, and probably not a surprise that it's happening with, a leader in the company who hasn't been in the industry for 30 years. And so is maybe more open to trying things a different way. One other thing that I've noticed, which is another silver lining of this terrible pandemic, and that is that customers are more receptive to organizations trying new things. And customers are more receptive to the transparent and authentic communication of, hey, we're going to do this. We'd love your feedback. And I think that's very liberating for a lot of organizations who might have gone in with the perception, or maybe it's a misperception, that they have to be perfect as defined by them for their customers. So I think it's a really great environment in which to experiment with new ideas.
Oh, right. And it goes back to something you were talking about earlier, which is that power of the authentic leader at this moment. It's also the power of the authentic company, that ability to be fully transparent. It's one thing to experiment. It's another thing to be honest about, hey, we're trying something. We really want your feedback. We're engaged in a dialogue with you, which I still think there's a lot of evolution around how well some organizations are doing that. So I think it's fantastic you're seeing the results from it. But I think that piece around experimenting with that honesty and that open feedback loop with the customers that really closes that loop out.
So that we've got something for people to really sort of take away. If there's one habit or practice that you think has really transformed the way that you are, what is it? What would you share with people? One thing that they could do or implement that would really change their level of optimism, energy, performance, satisfaction, anything?
Oh, great question. I think the biggest thing I can say that's probably been a power of performance that I encourage people to do. I talk a lot about the power of getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I pioneered this myself a few years ago with an experiment with my best friend where we spent 365 days doing things we were afraid of every day. And so every day putting ourselves outside our comfort zone. I write about it in the book and some of the lessons that we learned there. But I think one of the reasons this is so powerful is because when we think about the future, volatility, uncertainty, the complexity of what we're dealing with, it's not going away anytime soon. That idea of the world rapidly changing around us and needing to respond like that is going to be the new business as normal. And so we need to develop habits that can serve us and help us work and succeed in that type of environment. And so that need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, to trust yourself, to know how it feels to be outside of what you know and to be able to navigate that and learn how to come up and experiment and generate ideas and have a go and be a beginner again. That's going to be absolutely critical. So I would encourage people to think about how they can step out of their comfort zone into their courage zone, and what's a habit that they think if they could get more comfortable with would really add value to the success they're having and the impact they're achieving. And how do they start taking baby steps at experimenting with that? Don't hurdle straight into doing the extreme thing, but think about how you break down that thing that makes you uncomfortable and start having a go at it. What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing that's really made a difference is building in time to reflect. Not a lot of time, but I have noticed that we tend to overpack our schedules and we consume ourselves with busy work, and it's not actually really productive all the time. We feel productive because we're so busy, but that just sort of, even if it's 5 minutes a day, to sit down and say, right, what did I learn today? What did I like about what I did? What did I do that I would have preferred to do differently? And why did I do that? And how do I change it next time? I think that moment to reflect and prioritize is so important. And people don't set aside enough time to do that. They sometimes let their email inbox and their calendar and other people drive how they spend their very precious time. So just building in a little bit of time to reflect, be thoughtful, be purposeful, make choices in how you spend your time and what you're actually absorbing from that busy schedule that you have. I think that can be transformative.
I love the discipline of that practice, and it's one of the things I write about in the book, and a very common trait amongst leaders to take that step back so they can take in the full picture. And it kind of goes back to, Stephen Covey and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that distinction between urgent and important, and how easy it is to get lost in that cycle of urgency, the ping of the social media notifications and the emails, and to not necessarily be putting time where it's most important in terms of where you're really adding value or where your priorities need to be. And I think that reflective practice is so powerful.